So far, I've refrained from saying anything about the flooding in Texas and this horrific storm and the horrific devastation it's caused. The loss of life is unimaginable. Mainly, I haven't said anything publicly about it because, didn't have enough information yet. A lot of times these stories, it takes a long time for the truth to come out and for the facts to come out. And I try not to comment on things before we actually have some way of knowing something about them. Well, information is now coming out more than we've had before. And a pretty stunning story today about Kristi Noem holding up funds for the disaster relief and for life-saving crews to be sent in during the storm. And I think a lot of people, especially MAGA people, don't even know what all FEMA does. We think, oh, you know, if you've lost your home in a flood, then FEMA on the back end will help you get a new home, or they'll give you some money towards a new home or something like that. But that's not all they do. They actually come in during the storm, during the event, and work to save lives before the event, before the event impacts an area or a region. So that didn't happen this time. And this story is pretty amazing. I just wanted to go through some of it here with you. FEMA's response to Texas flood slowed by Nome's cost controls. Ah, get this. As monstrous floodwaters surged across central Texas late last week, officials at FEMA leapt into action, preparing to deploy critical search and rescue teams and life-saving resources like they have in countless past disasters. Notice what it says, critical search and rescue teams and life-saving resources. This is what they do on the front end of a disaster to try to minimize the damage and mostly to try to minimize the loss of life. But almost instantly, FEMA ran into bureaucratic obstacles, four officials inside the agency told CNN. As CNN has previously reported, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, whose department oversees FEMA, recently enacted a sweeping rule aimed at cutting spending. Every contracting grant over $100,000 now requires her personal sign-off before any funds can be released. This is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. $100,000 to an agency like FEMA is like 12 cents to us. No, it's like 12 tenths of a cent to us. Absolutely ridiculous. Oh, we got to save money. We're going to streamline and become more efficient. Well, there's a reason we didn't streamline that much in the past. And I think the results and the tragic, tragic loss of life in this storm, an unnecessary loss of life, I am now convinced I can say, uh, probably pretty credibly at this point, that there was some loss of life in this storm that could have been averted had all these cuts not been made to FEMA. Had Elon Musk under Trump's authority not gone in with an axe to chain, or what was it, a chainsaw, right? Yeah. If he hadn't gone in with a chainsaw to just demolish the government. This is why we have government. I hope people who supported this president, I hope they will start to see, keep your eyes open and keep an open mind, and please be objective, but keep an open mind. As more and more things like this happen, you may look at this and say, oh, well, nothing, it couldn't have been, it couldn't have been prevented here. Uh, yeah, the storm couldn't be prevented, but some loss of life probably most likely could have been prevented. But as we see more and more disasters like this, killing more people than they ever used to in the past, please, if you're MAGA or if you supported this president and you were a strong supporter, please keep an open mind and start asking yourself, what's different now when we're seeing more death from a storm like this than we would have in the past? And the past, what's the difference between now and the past? And the difference is they cut NOAA, they cut funding to the Weather Service, they cut staff, they fired people, and the office in Texas that handled this area was understaffed. And FEMA was underfunded. Maybe not underfunded, but the funding came way too late. So let's look at the rest of the story. Uh, where did I leave off? So for FEMA, where disaster response costs routinely soar into the billions as the agency contracts with on-the-ground crews, officials say, look at this, they contract with people on the ground, crews who are set up, they know who they are. They just contract with them when there's an emergency. Officials say that threshold is essentially pennies, requiring sign-off for relatively small expenditures. In other words, anything FEMA is going to do that's going to help is going to cost way more than $100,000. So if they have to wait for a single individual, the head of the department, who's very busy doing all sorts of things, to sign something with her own hand, I'm assuming they're not going to use the auto pen there. But if they're going to rely on that, she has the ability to hold it up just by saying, I'm out of the office today. I'll be back tomorrow. And what we're going to see, she didn't make them wait 1 day. She made them wait 3 days. 3 days in an emergency. All right. In essence, they say the order has stripped the agency of much of its autonomy at the very moment its help is needed most. We were operating under a clear set of guidance: lean forward, be prepared, anticipate what the state needs, and be ready to deliver it, a longtime FEMA official told CNN. That's not as clear of an intent for us at the moment. In other words, that's not our primary driving mission right now, because it can't be, because this government, this administration has just tangled up the smooth functioning of all these agencies. For example, as Central Texas towns were submerged in rising waters, FEMA officials realized they couldn't pre-position urban search and rescue crews from a network of teams stationed regionally across the country. They have search and rescue crews that they send out. Did you know that? Did you know that was going to be cut, or at least not sent out in time? In the past, FEMA would have swiftly staged these teams, which are specifically trained for situations including catastrophic floods, closer to a disaster zone, and anticipation of urgent requests, multiple agency sources told CNN. So these are all the things that happen behind the scenes that we never saw the government do. We saw the results. We saw there wasn't, well, we didn't know at the time there wasn't as much loss of life as there would be without them, but we're finding out now there's more loss of life when you can't pre-position search and rescue teams before the storm hits. Of course. Look, conservatives have spent so many decades bashing government, insulting the people who work for the government, lazy slobs, they don't produce anything, they just suck out of the economy all our money that we earn, all kinds of crazy charges against the people who worked in our government. And they never stop to realize, just look at the agency names and their purposes. Most of the agencies in our government are designed to protect us from one threat or another. The military protects us from external threats of aggression from other nations. The Justice Department and the FBI protect us from internal threats of crime, of criminals. And FEMA and the Weather Service and the agencies like that protect us from threats from the weather. The health services protect us from threats from germs, from bad germs. And, when everything's going smoothly, and as it has gone for many years, it's easy for people to just start complaining and complaining and complaining. And after a while, those complaints say, let's just get rid of the whole thing. Stupid idea. You don't want to get rid of these agencies, and it's a shame, such a shame in my mind, that we are literally having to get rid of these things for people to hopefully come around to have an appreciation for what we had and for what these good people in our government did. I'm not saying every person in the government was good, but I think the vast majority of them were. All right. But even as Texas rescue crews raced to save lives, FEMA officials realized they needed Noem's approval before sending those additional assets. Now get this. Here's the big part of the story. Noem didn't authorize FEMA's deployment of urban search and rescue teams until Monday, more than 72 hours after the flooding began. That's outrageous. That right there should cause her to be fired. Absolutely fired. But how can she be fired? She's doing what the president told her to do. So This should surely be grounds for us never to vote for him again. Literally, all these ideas came from him. And as I hear him talk, I hear echoes of conservative talk radio show hosts from decades, from the past decades to, from the past 3 decades. And all of this belief that government is just a waste, it's an albatross around our neck, we got to get rid of it. If we can get rid of all of it or as much of it as possible, then we can all get rich because we will no longer have to pay taxes and pay for all these lazy people, no count people to have jobs who don't deserve jobs. And they can only get jobs because they can only work for the government. And it turns out our government was so blessed in so many ways to have people that were highly qualified who could have had jobs outside of government making far more, who took jobs in government because they wanted to help protect America. Amazing. And we trashed that. We trashed it. And now we're paying the price. This is the price. This is part of the price. Now, get this. Homeland Security, listen to their defense for all this. It's unbelievable. Homeland Security officials have defended the federal response in Texas and President Donald Trump's plan to dismantle FEMA and shift more responsibility for disaster response to the states. Tricia McLaughlin, a DHS spokeswoman, told CNN that Noem did not need to authorize additional FEMA resources initially because the department used other DHS search and rescue assets. She added that over time, as a need for FEMA resources arose, those requests received Noem's approval. So what do you mean use other DHS search and rescue assets? FEMA is the one who had everything set up for these types of emergencies. Why did we have different parts of the agency doing the same thing and duplicating this work? You want to streamline government, then move all that into FEMA, move it into one agency. But I have a feeling they're just making this up. In a minute, we're going to see what some of the other areas they brought these people in from. You're going to be amazed by that. But yeah, so she said we used other DHS search and rescue assets. Really. We didn't use the ones that were specifically designed for this kind of emergency. Now, as I speak, the last I read, the death toll is 120 with 170 missing. This is it's going to be almost 300, it looks like. It's just so sad, so unnecessary. I'm not saying everybody could have been saved, but I guarantee you, I really believe in my heart that a lot of those people could have been saved and that many wouldn't have been killed in this disaster. Now, check this out. FEMA is shifting from, this is their excuse. FEMA is shifting from bloated, DC-centric dead weight to a lean, deployable disaster force that empowers state actors to provide relief for citizens. How's that working out for you? How's that working out for you, Tricia? Seriously? You think this worked well? This was a shining success? Something to be celebrated because we've streamlined it and gotten rid of the DC-centric dead weight? Wow. Wow, unbelievable. Really, just disgusting. She said the old processes are being replaced because they failed Americans in real emergencies for decades. Seriously? We have maybe what looks like might end up being around 300 deaths from a flood in the hill country of Texas? And that's a shining success? And you're going to you're going to dare say that we failed for decades? And thank goodness we now have this new system that's, done so well in its first emergency? Other Homeland Security components, get this is unbelievable. Other Homeland Security components have assisted, including the U.S. Coast Guard and Customs and Border Protection. Are you kidding me? What are they going to do? Go into the flood-ravaged zone and pick up people to deport? They were sending CBP agents in to deport people during the flood? You got to be kidding. And U.S. Coast Guard, what does the U.S. Coast Guard have to do with the central part of Texas? There's no navigable waters anywhere near there. Don't they just operate on the coast? That's in their name, right? I know they have lakes in the whole country, but seriously, that's not, the Coast Guard doesn't do lakes. Wow. So instead of sending in the one agency that's designed to do this, they said, let's send in the Coast Guard and Customs and Border Patrol. Wow, that's unbelievable. The incompetence of these people and the sheer ignorance of how government runs and what functions smoothly and what makes things work. It's it's sickening that we as a nation have chosen freely to put these people in charge, because it was obvious a long time ago that the whole group of people that the president brings in with him are incompetent, and their only goal in life is to appease him. He's their boss. He's the one they answer to. No answer to the Constitution, no answer to what's best for America. They go talk to him. They may say, well, it would be best if we did this. He goes, no, I don't want to do that. Oh, okay. Then, oh, yeah, you're right. We should never have done that. I'm sorry I said that. When loyalty is the ultimate litmus test, this is what you get. This is what you get. Get this. One Texas state official told CNN that the Texas Emergency Management Division has been interacting with FEMA. Oh, they did a great job. In the way we always do for disasters like this. The official added that Texas has quite a bit of capabilities related to disaster management on its own. Really? So where were they this past week? Show us. Show us the money. Where's the money? I- Honestly, how dare them come out and say, we have quite a bit of capabilities on our own. We don't even need FEMA. After this disaster? That they're going to take credit for having this done, having this taken care of on their own? Unbelievable. Look at this. Texas did request aerial imagery from FEMA to aid search and rescue operations. This is vital in a case like this. But that was delayed as it awaited Noem's approval for the necessary contract. There you go, right there. Search and rescue was delayed because of this whole crazy system they've come up with to save money and streamline everything and get rid of DC-centric bloat. I'll tell you something, that DC-centric bloat worked pretty well for a long time. Oh, I know. You'll say, oh, no, it was terrible. It was a disaster. This is a disaster. All disasters are going to have problems, but you either have fewer problems or more problems. And from what I see, we have a lot more problems in this disaster than we normally do in a case like this. The chaos has exposed a deeper uncertainty within FEMA about its ability to respond, its mission, and its authority under the Trump administration, just as hurricane and wildfire seasons have gotten underway. So yeah, they're going to be kind of flailing now for a while. Oh boy, jeez, big mess, big mess. Look, I'm not saying I don't know what would have happened if things had been different, but it's reasonable to assume, don't you think? And logical to assume that if those people who were fired weren't fired, that if they were still in place, that perhaps it would have been minimized. If they hadn't come up with this crazy system where nothing can be spent over $100,000 without Noam's signature, maybe lives would have been saved. You see, it led to the delay of search and rescue teams. The meteorologist who was in charge of coordination and communications of warnings wasn't on duty that night. Why not? The hydrologists who were responsible for rainfall and runoff calculations weren't on duty that night. Why not? These are the people who would have been the first to detect that a huge disaster was coming and that people needed to be evacuated. These people who were fired, would then get into contact with the coordinator of warning communications, who was also not there, fired, and alerted him or her to the fact that the media needed to be notified, that law enforcement needed to be notified, and that FEMA needed to be notified immediately, on the spot, not 3 days later. But none of that happened because those people were fired and the office that handled this was short-staffed. And the idiotic reason this has happened is because Republicans and this has been going on for a long time. I grew up in this. I was taught this. I believed this for a long time too. Republicans don't believe in experts. They don't believe they're necessary. They don't value education and knowledge and expertise in the same way most of us do. They think government wastes money on experts. They literally think money spent on experts is wasted money. So when they started firing all these people in our government, a lot of us knew it would only be a matter of time before that would have a devastating effect. But we also knew it would be most difficult for his supporters to connect those dots. So I'm just hoping that Trump supporters will be able to connect these dots and say, why did so many people die in a flood? It was a flash flood. It was a really big flood. That's true. But if they'd had search and rescue, if they had aerial support to know where to go, to know where people needed to be rescued, don't you think that could have saved some lives? Doesn't that make sense? Anyway, I just know this. I know in the past, disasters that turn out this way get tied around the necks of the president, whether they had anything to do with it or not. George Bush, Katrina, um, Obama, Hurricane Sandy, 2012. So will this get tied around Trump's neck? If not, it's a sign that MAGA is truly still a cult. It's a sign that it's a cult. Because in the past, they would have been the first to jump on the president. If he had been a Democrat, if this had happened under Biden, just imagine what they would be screaming about. Disaster, disaster, Biden's a disaster. This is terrible. Will we hear any of that now? I haven't heard it yet. Let's see. Let's see if we do. Let's hope for the best. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.